And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to check out a small game in kind of the rabbit-sized box. At least I think this is what the rabbit-sized box from Dice Hate Me is. This game is the Great Heartland Hauling Company by Jason Kotarski and published by Dice Hate Me Games. This is a pretty simple pick-up and deliver. You can see it fits in this small box, but inside this small box they've packed quite a bit of stuff, including several different ways to play the game, as well as a expansion and a fifth player that I've got fit in here as well. So real quick, why don't we just take a look at what you get inside of this box. We'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here at the end and we'll get my opinions on the Great Heartland Hauling Company. So here you can see the layout for Great Heartland Hauling Company. I've set this up with the base game with only 2 players, but note that the base will play 2 to 4, but the layout of the map will change. There'll be a few more cards for 3 and even more cards for 4, laid out slightly differently. The idea of the game is that each player is a trucker, and you'll see I have 2 trucks here in the center at the distribution center in West Morgan. Now this distribution center can change locations if you want, but right now the basic game, it starts in the center. Each player is trying to move around this board here, picking up different types of cargo, of which there are 4. There are cattle, pigs, corn, and soybeans. You're going to be trying to pick these up from certain locations and deliver them to other locations as quickly as possible in order to earn money. The objective being, in a 2-player game, to earn 50 money, and the more players you have, the less money you need to earn. Now, in order to do this, you're going to follow a pretty simple turn order, and that's laid out right here. You're going to go ahead, you're going to move first, and you must move. Then you're going to take one action, either load, unload, or discard, and then you're going to refuel, meaning draw more cards. So each player's truck is represented by this little board here, and you start with 5 money, which you can use on your turn in order to help you move. And basically that's what you're going to be using money for, except for you need to get more money in order to win the game. So each player will start the game with 4 cards in hand, and at the beginning of the game you're going to start by moving somewhere because you can't do anything on your basic spot and you must move. When moving, there are 2 ways you can move. You may either spend your money going down a money per space you want to move, up to 3 spaces, or you can use fuel cards from your hand, and you'll see that I've drawn a couple of fuel cards, a 1 and a 2. They also come in 3 movement fuel cards. When I want to move, I must move exactly as many spaces as the fuel cards I spend if I use fuel cards. So if I discard a 1 fuel card, I must move 1 space. If I discard a 2, I'd move 2 spaces, and if I wanted to discard a combination, I would move 3 spaces. No more than 3 spaces ever. You can't combine money and fuel cards, so if I wanted to pay with money in order to move, I'd have to pay as much money as I wanted to move spaces up to 3. So let's say that I go ahead and I want to move 2 spaces. I would discard this card and move 2 spaces with my truck, saying that I'm the orange player. 1, 2. Now that I'm here, I've finished my move segment, and I can go ahead and take my action for the turn, which is load, unload, or discard. Well, I don't have any cargo to load or to unload right now, but I do have 8 open spaces. What I want to do now that I'm here is load a couple of cattle, and I have 2 cattle cards in my hand. In order to load something, you must pay 1 card per thing that you'd like to load as long as it's a native good, meaning that it was produced on that spot. So we'll see here that cattle is the native good of this area. So I can pay 1 card to load each of those cattle, meaning that I discard 2 cards to pick up both of these and place them into my truck. Now I should have had 1 more card in my hand at the start. It's actually a 5-card starting hand, but now that I've done this, I've finished my action for the turn, I've picked up my 2 cattle, I would then go on to the refuel part of my turn. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I have 2 cards in my hand and I should draw up to 5. When I do this, I'm going to be drawing either from these 3 available cards or from the top of the deck, and I have my choice each time that I draw. Now, in order to drop things off later, I'm going to need more cattle cards to drop them off somewhere that accepts cattle. And you'll see like Eureka down here accepts both pigs and cattle, and the number below that is the amount of money they pay out per one that they accept. So I'm probably going to want to try and pick up some cattle cards either to deliver them to Eureka, or even better over here to Jericho, because they pay $5 per cattle. You'll note that there are no cattle in this line, so maybe I draw from the top of the deck, and you'll see that I actually pick up a cattle right away, adding it to my hand. I decide to try my luck again and don't get one, and I figure, hey, I've already got some movement cards, so maybe I'll take a 3rd one from the top of the deck. At this point, my turn would end and it would pass to the next player, who would then take their turn, first moving, either paying with money or using the fuel cards from their hand, then doing their action of either loading, unloading, or discarding, and then, of course, refueling their hand by drawing back up. Now, the other actions, as I mentioned, are trying to unload things. So let's say it's my next turn and I'd like to move 2 spaces. So I move 1, 2. And now I'm over here on Jericho. I'd like to drop off my cattle, only one of them because I don't have 2 cattle cards. So I discard my cattle card and drop the cattle off in that area. That would pay me $5, and I would move up $5 on my card here, which then puts me up to 10, and I'm 1/5 of the way towards winning the game. These goods that are here are then able to be picked up and moved somewhere else, but when you do so, using a load action, you actually have to pay twice as many cards to pick them up. So to pick up a cattle from a non-native location, it's going to take me 2 cattle cards, and basically you're going to want to accumulate those because eventually native goods may not be available on their native locations. So the idea here, as you may get, is to have as many different types of cargo on your truck that you can deliver at the same time at a location. You can never deliver more than one type of good when you stop somewhere. So having both cattle and corn on my truck wouldn't do me any good when stopping in Jericho, because I'd simply have to leave and drop the corn off somewhere else. But if I'd have come here with a second cattle card in order to get rid of my second cattle that I had, that probably would have been a better move. So maybe moving somewhere else to pick up some more goods, then eventually finding that cattle card and swinging back towards Jericho to drop my cattle off would be great. The trick here is that as other trucks are moving around, you're not allowed to stop where they're already at. So it could end up in a situation where you're ready to move into Jericho, but the neutral truck is here and you can't go there because they're standing there. So you have to make a move somewhere else in order to eventually come back to them once they've moved off of that spot. Now the game will go on in this manner until one player reaches $50 in a 2-player game, 40 in a 3-player game, or 30 in a 2-player game. When that happens, each other player gets one more turn, and then you're going to go ahead and see what the final scores are. And this is kind of interesting because at the end of the game, you lose points for goods that are left over on your truck. 2 per pig or cow, and 1 per coin or soybean. So even though you end the game at the 50 points, if you have a lot of goods left over on your truck, you may actually end up losing because someone else surpasses you, or because they have less stuff left on their truck at the end of the game. So, kind of have to be careful there to make sure that you don't have a lot of stuff on your truck when you decide to go over the point of ending the game. Inside of this game, there are also several expansions, and you'll see that the reverse side of these cards is what's called an alternate route. These cards will have different route things that kind of prevent you from taking certain routes or have a cost to doing so. For example, this one here has a cube on it. Anytime you want to go past this cube, meaning traversing from one card to another over that cube, from Eureka to Troy, for example, in this case, you're going to have to pay $1 for every cube you have over 4 in your truck. So it's kind of a tax. Others of these will have different things on them. For example, roadblocks, which you can see here, that actually prevent you from moving in the direction of the roadblock or through that roadblock at all. Yet another one will have a $sign symbol that will prevent you, or that will make you pay $1 every time you go over that. So you kind of want to plan your routes around these specific things. In addition, there's a 5th player option where you can add in these cards here, which are kind of areas that don't have native goods but accept some of the other goods at a little bit higher payouts. So you can go off into the Badlands, which is what these cards are called, and drop goods off but never pick anything up from them. But you may get paid a little bit more for going out of your way. They've also included an expansion called the Truckstops Expansion, and these get placed around the board if you want to use them, and can give players special abilities. For example, if you go on the GPS spot and pay $5, you can pick this ability up, which will let you move diagonally once per turn. Or you may get one that lets you add one to all of your fuel cards when you use them. Or one that lets you combine fuel cards and money in order to move, which you usually can't do. Or one that lets you trade with other players when you're next to them on the board. So, all types of variety that have been included, even going so far as including alternate map setups that you can use if you get tired of the standard setup. But, no matter what, whoever manages to get to the amount of money that you need to win the game first, and actually has the most money after doing their deductions, will be the winner. Before I actually conclude here, I actually want to mention that there's one more action I didn't talk about. And that action is discarding. If you don't want to load or unload because you don't have appropriate cards in your hand, you may always discard, but doing so costs you $1. This will allow you to discard as many cards from your hand as you would like and then draw back up in the hopes of finding something that you need in order to deliver your goods. If you ever go all the way down to $0, you actually get sent back to the center, the distribution center, and you have to take a discard action in order to continue your turn. But essentially, you're going to want to try and avoid this action as much as possible if you can make pickups and deliveries, because that's the way to generate money. But sometimes it's a necessity to cycle out your hand, get some new cards in order to be able to effectively make your deliveries. And there you have it. That is the Great Heartland Hauling Company. Now, I know several of my followers are going to go ahead and say, wait a minute, Ryan's automatically going to dislike this game because it's small and it's light and it's simple. And actually, you're wrong on this one. I was pleasantly surprised by the Great Heartland Hauling Company, especially by the amount that's packed into that box and the amount of gameplay and variability or variety that's available inside of that box. I do actually like the simplicity of the pick up and deliver mechanism. Going, picking something up, and then having to either pay money in order to move forward or get those movement cards, the fuel cards, and allowing you to move and only being allowed to move an exact distance with those fuel cards kind of makes you spend that money sometimes. So you have to spend points in order to hopefully make points up eventually. Now, there are also some included variants in the box that I think are a good idea, like shuffling in the distribution center and randomly placing that so that you don't have the same starting point every time. If you're looking for a little bit of a challenge, there's a way that you can modify it so you can only carry 6 goods on your truck. And I think that adds a little bit of tightness to the game as well, kind of limiting you on what you can pick up and carry. The included expansion, the alternate routes on the flip side of those cards that are much harder that I talked about in the video, I'm not particularly a fan of those. I personally don't see a way that those are going to improve the game for me. Other players may like them. I specifically did not like them. I played a game with that and some of the other expansions and played it on its own. I just wasn't a big fan of the alternate routes. They made it very difficult in order to traverse the board. And that, combined with some of the other expansion options like the different truck stops that give you variable powers, kind of gets a little bit broken. I think if they included some better guidelines on how to use that expansion, the alternate routes expansion, the flip over side of those cards, I think it might have gone a little bit better, but as it is, there's no real guidelines on how to set those up except for that you can't have 2 of them next to each other. And I think that without guidelines, it makes it very difficult to effectively use that expansion, especially combined with any of the other ones. So if you're going to use it on its own and use them sparingly. But overall, I would say the Great Heartland Hauling Company is a great little card game, especially for the pick up and deliver genre. A lot of game packed into a small box, and one I would definitely suggest you check out. If you are a fan of this type of genre, or you're looking for small travel games that you can easily get out and get a lot of play out of, that's Great Heartland Hauling Company from Dice Hate Me Games and Jason Kotarski.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.